I have given my testimony 4 times now, and each time the tribunal makes me begin in the same place. Not with the breach, not with the 50. They make me begin with the room, the long hall on the frozen edge of Cassandra 3, where the light side of the moon meets the dark side in a single unmoving line of frost, and where 50 of the most lethal soldiers in 300 years of recorded war stood absolutely still, while a human woman drank from a cup. My eyes recorded all of it. That is what my species does. We are the Velsari, and whatever we witness is sealed in the lattice behind our compound eyes as sworn evidence that cannot be edited, cannot be softened, cannot be made to flatter the one who carries it. I cannot lie to you even if I wished to. So believe me when I tell you what those 50 were before that hall, because the size of what fell is measured by the height it fell from. The Korath Talon 50 had never lost. Not bent, not slowed, not delayed, never lost. 300 standard years, 411 boarding actions, and a single unbroken column of victories so total that border governors used to surrender the moment the Talon's transponder appeared in their skis. They were gene-locked against fear before they could walk. They felt no panic, no hesitation, no mercy, because those things had been carefully removed from them the way you remove a flaw from a casting. They were not soldiers in the way your worlds understand the word. They were a verdict that arrived wearing armor. And I, Vesicone, third-tier boarding officer, attached to the Talon as their legal recorder, was there to witness their 412th victory and seal it for the archives. I genuinely believed I would. Honestly, every instinct I had, every record I carried, told me the morning would end the way all the others had. That is the thing about a perfect record. It teaches you to stop watching. Let me tell you, then, how the column that had never broken came to stand frozen on the ice, and how the breaking began with the softest target any of us had ever been sent to take. The dispute itself was small, the kind that fills 1,000 archive entries and changes nothing. 2 governments quarreled over a shipping corridor near the Cassandra system, and one of them hired the Talon to apply pressure the only way the Talon knew how. The objective was the Thornwell Joint Cadet Academy, a training school perched on the Terminator line of the moon, where officer cadets from a dozen species learned logistics and law and the boring machinery that keeps fleets from starving. The plan was simple: seize the cadets, hold them as leverage, let the fear of harming the young do the negotiating that armies could not. I read the reconnaissance file myself 3 times because my duty was to confirm the action was lawful before I sealed it. The file was almost insulting. Thornwell had no garrison, no defensive batteries, no shield grid, no standing troops, only instructors, most of them retired, teaching the dull subjects that nobody glorifies. The threat assessment ran to a single line for the human staff member who would matter most. Hannah Vaughan, age 41, instructor of logistics and protocol. Classification: non-combatant, risk, negligible. Warmaster Dushancourt read that same line aloud to the assault team, and the 50 of them laughed in the dry, clicking way the Korath laugh, which is less a sound of joy than a sound of certainty. I remember thinking the file was correct. A protocol instructor. The galaxy is full of beings who teach others how to fill out forms, and not one of them has ever stopped a boarding action. The Warmaster's confidence filled the dropship like a smell. That confidence was the thing they brought with them that they should have left behind. I understand that now. At the time I simply recorded it, the way I record everything, and the way I have learned to mistrust everything I record without watching it twice. Let me show you the breach, because it was beautiful and because nothing afterward was. The assault took 90 seconds. I have the exact count sealed behind my eyes, and I have replayed it for the tribunal until the number stopped meaning anything. The Talon 50 came down through the Academy's upper dome in 2 staggered waves, blew the locks on the dormitory wings, and flooded the corridors in a single coordinated surge that left no cadet more than 4 meters from a weapon at any moment. They did not fire. They did not need to. 50 gene-locked killers moving as one organism is not a fight you have. It is a weather event you survive. Doors that were meant to hold for an hour held for 4 seconds. The Academy's alarm finished its first full cycle, and the building was already taken. I followed in the second wave, recording, sealing, confirming the lawfulness of each entry the way my duty demanded. And I will tell you the truth as my eyes hold it. It was the cleanest action I had ever witnessed. Not one Korath out of position. Not one wasted motion. They reached the central hall, the long room on the frozen edge, with the great window where the light side and the dark side of the moon divide the floor into white fire and blue shadow. And there, the perfect machine met the first thing it could not process. A woman was waiting for them. She had not run. The cadets had scattered and been herded. The instructors had been pulled from their classrooms. But Hannah Vaughan stood at the head of the central hall as though she had been expecting visitors and was mildly disappointed in how many of them there were. She was not armed. She wore the plain gray coat of a Thornwell instructor, and her hair was going silver at the front, and in both of her hands, held the way you hold something warm against a cold morning, was a cup. A ceramic cup, chipped at the rim, painted along the side in faded letters I would later learn to read, in a human script that said, with no irony any of us could detect at the time, World's OKAYESD instructor. The War Master's column slowed. Not stopped, slowed, the way a current slows when the riverbed changes shape beneath it. 50 beings who had never once felt the small cold flicker that the rest of us called doubt felt something adjacent to it, and not one of them had the vocabulary for it. I recorded the slowing and did not understand it. Honestly, none of us did. We thought she was simply too foolish to be afraid. We had it precisely backward. She was not unafraid because she was foolish. She was unafraid because she had already won, and she was waiting with great patience for us to notice. Let me explain what the Talon did next, because it is the part the tribunal returns to most often, and the part that still makes the Korath in the gallery look at the floor. The doctrine of the Talon 50 is built on a single principle. Nothing in a room is harmless until it has been categorized. Every object, every being. Every shadow is assessed and assigned a threat value before the column commits. It is the discipline that had kept them undefeated, and it was, in that hall, the rope they tied around their own throats. Because the doctrine demanded they categorize the cup, and the cup refused to be categorized. 2 troopers raised their assessment optics and scanned it. The readout came back in the flat language of their helmets. Ceramic, fired clay, trace mineral glaze, no power source, no concealed mechanism, no chemical residue beyond an organic stimulant compound, the human drink, the one they brew obsessively and carry everywhere. Mass, 410 grams. Threat value, 0. And the Talon could not accept it. Do you understand the trap they were in? Their entire unbroken history was built on the certainty that anything held so calmly, so deliberately in the center of a hostile room by an enemy who would not run, must be a weapon, a trigger, a transmitter, a vial of something that ends columns. The doctrine that said categorize everything collided with the doctrine that said the calm enemy is the dangerous one, and the 2 truths ground against each other and produced nothing but more scans. They scanned it 11 times in the first minute. I counted. 11 full assessment cycles burned on a cup of clay, each one returning the same useless verdict, harmless, 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 and each one rejected because harmless could not be true. To put that in terms the archives understand, a single Talon assessment cycle is the resource they would normally spend categorizing an entire armed deck. They spent 11 of them on a drinking vessel. They had broken into the Academy in 90 seconds, and they spent the next 4 minutes unable to decide what a woman was holding. The War Master's voice came over the shared channel, and for the first time in the 411 actions I had recorded for him, it carried a thread of something that was not certainty. Identify the object, he said, and the column could not. That, I think, was the moment the fall truly began, though none of us would feel the ground for another 20 minutes. The machine had found a piece of the world it could not file, and a machine that cannot file the world starts, very quietly, to come apart. Let me move you forward to what they did while the cup defeated their optics, because the cruelty of it is part of the record and the tribunal does not let me leave it out. They worked. Whatever a Korath does not understand, it contains. And so while the assessment cycles spun uselessly on Hannah Vorn's cup, the rest of the Talon executed the seizure with the cold efficiency that had made them famous. They swept the dormitory wings and the lecture halls and the long underground corridors where the academy stored its records. They herded the cadets, children, most of them, by the reckoning of their own species, none older than a first commission, into the central hall and pressed them against the cold side of the great window, where the frost of the dark side of the moon bled through the glass. 240 cadets, 11 instructors. I sealed each number as I witnessed it, the way I am required to, and I will not pretend to you that the sealing was easy. The Velsari are a witnessing people, not a tender one, but there is a particular weight to recording the faces of the young when they understand all at once that the adults around them cannot help. I carry those faces still. They are part of the testimony and they do not fade. And through all of it, Hannah Vorn drank her coffee. She did not flinch when they brought the cadets in. She did not plead, did not bargain, did not do any of the things our threat models predict from a cornered non-combatant. She sipped from the cup, and she watched the War Master with an expression I have since learned to read in humans, the look of someone watching a person walk, slowly and with great confidence, toward a hole in the floor they have not yet seen. Once, when a young trooper passed too close to her, she lifted the cup a few centimeters out of his reach, the way you move a glass away from a clumsy child. It was such a small motion. The trooper froze. He had been gene-locked against fear, and he did not know what to do about a 41-year-old protocol instructor protecting her drink, because that situation had never once appeared in 300 years of doctrine. The War Master gave the order then that he believed would solve everything. "Take the cup," he said. And here is where the doctrine that had never failed began, openly, to fail. 2 troopers moved to take it, and both of them stopped a hand's width from her wrist, because to seize the object cleanly required them to classify it first, and they still could not. A Korath cannot complete an action its own doctrine has not authorized. The discipline is too deep, locked into them below the level of choice. They reached for a cup of clay, and their own training would not let their hands close, because the cup was still, officially, an unidentified object of potential lethal value, and you do not grab those barehanded. Honestly, watching 50 undefeated killers be defeated by their own thoroughness was the strangest thing my eyes have ever sealed. They were too good at their work to do their work. The War Master watched his troopers fail to take a cup from an unarmed woman, and something in the long, perfect line of his certainty finally cracked. He did the thing that columns do when their precision betrays them. He abandoned precision. "Destroy it," he said. "Let me tell you exactly what happened when they tried, because this is the moment the tribunal calls the hinge, and they are right too." A trooper drew a thermal blade, the short curved weapon the Korath used to end things that cannot be reasoned with, and he stepped toward Hannah Vorn and the cup with the full intention of ending both the object and the problem it represented. He had perhaps a meter to cross. He crossed half of it. Every helmet in the Talon 50 lit at once. I have seen alarms. I have recorded ship-wide alerts and station collapses, and the particular red flood that fills a cockpit when a reactor decides to leave the universe. I had never seen anything like what poured across the Korath Channel in that instant. Their tactical displays, every one of them, locked to a single overriding message in the cold gray script of interspecies law, and the message did not come from the Academy or from Hannah Vorn or from any source the Talon could shoot. It came from the system itself, from the deep, dormant legal architecture that underlies every treaty world in the sector, the architecture none of the 50 had thought to check, because none of them had ever needed to. The trooper with the blade stopped. Not by choice, his armor stopped him. his own system seizing his limbs the way a body seizes around a swallowed bone. The thermal blade hung in the air, a hand's width from the cup, and would not advance. And the trooper stood there, trembling with the effort of an order his own equipment was refusing to let him complete. The War Master demanded to know what was happening, and for the first time his recorder, that is me, that is Vesic own, whose duty was to confirm the lawfulness of every action before it was sealed, understood that I had failed in the only task that mattered. I had read the file 3 times. I had confirmed the action was lawful. I had not read the ground we were standing on. Because the assessment had been wrong from the first scan, the cup was not a weapon. It had never been a weapon. The Talon had spent 20 minutes asking the only question their doctrine knew how to ask: what can this thing do to us? And the cup could do nothing to them at all. That was never the point of it. The cup was not a thing that acted. It was a thing that proved. And what it proved was about to fall on 50 undefeated soldiers, with the full weight of 300 years of law they had never once had to learn. Hannah Vaughan set the cup down on the table beside her, gently, the way you set down something you have been waiting a long time to put your hands at rest. Then she spoke for the first time, and her voice was not loud, and it did not need to be. She said, "You really should have read the seal. Let me explain what the seal was, because everything turns on it, and because the simplicity of it is the part that the Korath cannot forgive themselves for. The chip on the rim of that cup, the small painted glyph that the Talon's optics had logged as decorative damage, a flaw in the glaze, a thing of no value, was not damage. It was a registered custodian's mark under the Kessendrew Accord, a treaty so old that most serving officers had never read past its title. The Accord had ended a war that nobody living remembered by establishing a simple, brutal principle. Certain places, certain grounds, would be held permanently neutral, and each would be entrusted to a single living custodian whose person and whose seal carried the inviolability of the ground itself. To raise a weapon against a custodian on custodial ground was not an act of war. It was, by the plain language of the Accord, an immediate and binding surrender of the one who raised it. The Thornwell Joint Cadet Academy was custodial ground. It had been for 200 years. That was the entire reason it had no garrison, no shields, no defenses of any kind. It had never needed them, because its single defense was the oldest and the heaviest in the sector, and it had been sitting in plain view on the rim of a chipped cup the whole time. Hannah Vaughan, instructor of logistics and protocol, was the registered custodian of Cassandra III. The mug was her seal of office. She carried it everywhere because a custodian's seal must never leave the custodian's hand, and because, she told the tribunal later with the faintest smile, it also kept her coffee warm. The Talon 50 had not seized a defenseless school. They had committed, 50 times over, the one act the Accord punished with total forfeiture. The moment the first trooper drew a blade against the custodian on her own ground, all 50 of them, and their war master, and their recorder, and their dropship and its codes and its charter, passed by operation of law into the custody of the Accord. They had stormed the academy in 90 seconds and surrendered it to themselves in the space of a single drawn blade, and not one of them had known they were doing it, because not one of them had thought to ask what the room itself was, only what they could do to the people inside it. The legal binding that flooded their helmets was not an attack. It was the Accord taking possession of what was now, lawfully, its property. Korath armor is built to enforce Korath law. The Accord simply spoke in a language their own systems were obligated to obey, and their discipline, the very thing that had made them undefeated, turned in their hands and held them still. They could not raise their weapons. They could not move toward the custodian. They could, in fact, do nothing at all that the law of surrendered combatants did not permit, which was very little, and which did not include leaving. 50 of the most dangerous beings in 300 years stood frozen on the frozen edge of the moon, undone not by a stronger weapon, but by a system they had been too specialized to see. And one human woman picked her cup back up, because a custodian seal must never leave her hand, and drank what was left of her coffee while the law she carried closed around the column like ice. Let me bring you to the end now, to the long quiet after, because the tribunal always asks me what it meant, and I have had a great deal of time to decide what to tell them. The aftermath was not violent. That is the part that unsettles the Koreth in the gallery more than any wound would. There was no battle, no last charge, no glorious failure they could carry home and reshape into a song. There was only paperwork, the slow, irreversible machinery of the Accord taking its lawful possession, cadet by cadet released, trooper by trooper logged, the great undefeated column processed like cargo by clerks who did not even raise their voices. The Talon 50 had spent 300 years making the galaxy afraid of how they ended things. They ended themselves in a filing. Warmaster Dushancourt did not survive it well. I watched him, I am required to watch, as the understanding reached him in stages, the way cold reaches a body. First the disbelief, the demand that someone show him his error. Then the long silence when the Accord was read to him in full, and he found no error to point to, only his own thoroughness used against him. Then the thing I had never recorded in a Koreth before, and hope never to record again. A being gene-locked against fear discovering, far too late in his life, the one thing fear had been protecting him from feeling. He had built his entire self around being unbeatable in a fight. No one had ever told him the room might not be a fight at all. As for me, I am here as prisoner witness, my testimony sealed and entered, my failure logged beside the failure of all the rest. I confirmed the action was lawful. I read the threat file 3 times. I never once read the floor. The same blindness that took the Talon took their recorder too, and I do not pretend otherwise because my eyes do not let me. And the cup sits on the table in the evidence hall now, chipped and faded. World's OKAYESD instructor turned toward the gallery so that everyone who enters must read it. The tribunal keeps it there on purpose. They want the soldiers who pass through to look at it and feel the cold thing the Talon felt, and to take from it the lesson the Accord was written to teach. So let me give you the lesson plainly. The way Hannah Vorn would, because she is a protocol instructor and she believes in saying things plainly. The Talon 50 were not defeated by strength. They were defeated by their own excellence, narrowed to a single edge. They had perfected one thing, the application of force, so completely, for so long, that they forgot force was not the only system that governs a room. They walked onto ground ruled by law, and they asked it only the question that violence knows how to ask. And the ground answered them in a language they had never bothered to learn, and it answered them with everything they had. That is the danger of becoming the best in the universe at one thing. You stop being able to see the rooms where that one thing does not matter. You scan the cup 11 times and never once ask whose hand is holding it, or what the chip on its rim might mean, or why a woman who should be afraid is so very calm. So I will leave you with the question the tribunal leaves me with every time when the testimony is done. Were the Talon 50 destroyed that day, or were they simply shown, for the first and only time, the shape of the world outside the narrow window they had spent 300 years mistaking for the whole sky? I have witnessed it 4 times now. I still do not know. But I know which way the woman with the cup would answer, and I know she would do it gently, and I know that somewhere on the frozen edge of Cassandra 3 her coffee is still, somehow, warm.